Hi, welcome to Wellness Wednesday with Dr. Gaynor. I hope you guys have had a wonderful week. I am going to give everybody a few minutes to get in here, and today we are talking about sleep. Sometimes we can think of sleep as laziness. I can sleep when I die, but no, sleep is a part of your overall wellness. So it's actually extremely important. And today I want to talk about why it's important. So, again, welcome to Wellness Wednesday or Wednesday Wellness with Dr. Gaynor. I hope you guys have had a wonderful week. I am in Georgia and the weather has not been great. It has been raining, but definitely excited for this summer. Wondering if anyone has any summer plans or anything that you are looking forward to now that the season has changed and it is time to kind of get away and rejuvenate. I hope you guys have some fun things coming up. Once again, today we are going to be talking about sleep and just how important it is just for our overall wellness and health. Really wanting to just kind of knock down some of the myths that we have about sleep being a luxury because it's actually essential. We need sleep to function. And sometimes what we think is functioning is really not. So, again, welcome to Wednesday Wellness with Dr. Gaynor, and I'm going to jump right in. So, imagine this it is 2 a.m., and you probably need to go to sleep, but you're thinking about the to-do list, the things that you have to do tomorrow, maybe something that happened in the past, pondering questions like, why do we exist? And all of this is happening all at the same time, and you are not alone. In fact, 65% of women are trying to find better sleeping habits for their overall wellness. But again, sleep is not a luxury. It's really crucial and essential for your overall mental wellness. So, I learned this stat. Consider this. Did you know that one night of bad sleep can increase your anxiety by 30%? And when we are struggling with sleep, over time, it can start to impact or shrink the areas of our brain that are responsible for emotional regulation. That's kind of scary. But there is hope because we can start to make little changes now that will actually change our sleep story. Because we all have a sleep story, and there are things that all of us can do to help us get better at it. Also, keep in mind that this is not about perfection. Things aren't always going to go perfectly. There are going to be times when we're having difficulty sleeping, when maybe we're going through stresses. But what are some overall tips that we can do that help in general with our sleep so that we can be well overall? So, first, I kind of want to talk about the science of it. Okay. So, when you don't sleep, this is what happens. Your brain's amygdala, which is your panic button, your fight or flight, starts to go into overdrive, which means that stress becomes bigger. And what also happens is your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, starts to shut down, which essentially means that smaller stresses become bigger than they usually would, and your brain can't problem solve. And so it's a vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to bad sleep, and sleep fuels anxiety. And then there's kind of the cognitive piece of it. Have you ever had a time where you walked into a room and you couldn't remember what you were doing or why you were in the room, or you struggled to focus? That's deprivation, and it's impacting your ability to focus and your memory. And again, that starts to impact our overall functioning. So before I get into what we do about this, let me just be honest. We've all had difficulty sleeping. I can think about a time where I was overworked. I remember earlier in my career, before I started my practice, I was working a few jobs. I was doing everything that I needed to do to get myself ready, to be prepared, to make money. And I remember being so overworked that I wasn't sleeping. I was just eating when I needed to because it was really important that I was able to reach these goals. Until I got to after this kind of 2 week period where I could not even function. I had to sleep for the entire weekend. So that just wasn't one night of not sleeping. It was a consistent pattern of not taking care of myself. And I couldn't function because my body said no, and I had to listen to the no. A lot of times I tell people pay attention to your body, or your body will tell, because your body will tell you what it needs. And when we don't do what our body needs, a lot of time we're forced into those situations. And what that taught me is I had to pay attention on a more consistent basis, because there have definitely also been times where I've been so exhausted because I've been thinking about all the things that are happening in the business. Did this happen with the client? What about this? What about that? And the next day when I went into work, not only were most of those concerns that I was worried about not really a big problem, but I had another problem. I wasn't able to focus and really engage because I was exhausted, spending my time worrying about things that, one, I had no control over at the moment, and two, didn't or weren't really happening. And so it doesn't mean that the concerns you have aren't valid, but it also means if we don't have adequate sleep to help our brain make better decisions so that we're not in stress mode, how much are we really taking care of ourselves by not sleeping? We really need everything to be functioning well so we can be productive, do the things that we need to do, make the right choices, be able to work hard and be productive. But I know that there have been also lots of times where I was in graduate school and I was studying probably for 5 hours. And after the first 2 or 3, I don't think anything was going in. So I was really wasting those 2 hours sitting there staring at a book that I was not absorbing. What else could I have been doing? And how could I have taken better care of myself, gotten more sleep, and been more productive at the end of the day? So, with that being said, let's talk about the common culprits that can impact our sleep. So, I know that I am guilty of this one, caffeine in the afternoon. So, did you know that if you are having coffee, let's say 3 o'clock in the afternoon and later, 25% of that caffeine is still in your body at 9 p.m. A lot of times caffeine helps us get fueled. It helps us in our day. It becomes a regular part of our functioning, but too much of anything is not great. And so I am definitely very guilty of having my afternoon cup of coffee. And so maybe this is not about all or nothing. It's about limiting the things that are going to significantly impact us. So what if we stopped after 1:30 or 2 o'clock with coffee? If we drink coffee at 3 p.m. and it's still in our system at 9 p.m., then how much is that going to impact our ability to rest? Caffeine is doing the complete opposite. It's keeping us awake and it's keeping us alert. When we're falling asleep, we want to feel the complete opposite. So let's pay attention to these little habits, particularly caffeine, and how that can impact us. And it doesn't have to just be coffee. It can be a lot of the energy drinks that we take. But what do we use to fuel ourselves up with energy that could later be impacting our ability to rest at the end of the day? So the next thing is stress in bed. So if we are working from our bed, if we're doing work, if we are having stressful conversations, if what's associated with our bedroom, with our bed is related to stress, strain, heartache, difficulties, then we tend to associate that area with those stresses. A lot of times where we experience things and the emotions we have can be directly tied. So have you ever had a feeling of nostalgia where it felt like something similar because you had a similar situation and it invokes a lot of feelings? I know a lot of times when I've had a stressful situation, let's say I've had an argument with a friend, and the argument was fresh. I can remember where I was standing in my house and what I was doing. All of that comes back because those are strong emotions. It's the same thing with stress and strain and work. It's really important for us to separate those. Doesn't mean that there won't be stressful things that are happening, but when we're on the clock, when we're having harder conversations, when we're struggling, if there's a space that we can go away from our room, that actually will help, because what we want to do is create a sense of peace and calm in our room that's not associated with anything stressful if possible. What that looks like is different for different people. But one of the things I notice is I need to turn the lights off because the lights are stimulating to me. I wear a lot of blue light glasses because I noticed that it really helped me after the pandemic when all I did was look at screens. So really turning down the lights helps. For me, having candles, stretching, that helps my body to start to relax. So really coming up with bedroom routines that create relaxation, and also doing that in a space that's related to relaxation. So if I know that stretching is going to be helpful, I'm going to do that in my room. If I know that light is peaceful to me, I'm going to cut my lights off as I'm preparing to go to bed. I'm going to cut off television. I'm not really going to talk on the phone because I know that I'm trying to wind my brain down. So, what are the things that you would say you associate with peace? Think about those things and start to incorporate those in your bedroom routine, in your room, so that that can be associated with sleep. The other thing is inconsistent sleep schedules. We cannot always predict when we're going to go to sleep, but having a predictable time to go to sleep is really important. A few years ago, I got a Fitbit and I set up the time that I would go to bed. And now every night it reminds me. Do I always follow it? No. But it's an indicator to me that I need to go to sleep. And what I realize is when I don't follow it and I don't start winding down, I recognize the difference later. I recognize that I'm sleepier. I recognize that I'm more irritable. So it really does make a difference. We know that we eat and sleep every day, but life is so busy. Having those reminders to say, okay, it's time for me to start winding down on purpose before my body makes me sleep and kind of be incapacitated is really important. So, how do we start to get on a regular schedule? Because when we are um, having drastic changes in our sleep schedule. So going to bed maybe at 10 and then at 1 and then at 3, our body never gets a chance to get into full rest. So what can tend to happen is when you're sleeping later and later and you're not having a consistent sleep schedule, there will be a few nights where you're sleep really hard. But I remember reading a few years ago that you never really catch up on sleep. So it's almost again that thing where your body is like, nope, we can't do it anymore, but you never fully feel rested because you just get to a sense of exhaustion all the time where you just have to sleep. And to continue to wait for that again is going to impact attention. It's going to impact focus. A lot of times the more that we're struggling with sleep, the more that we're struggling to kind of function on a regular basis, it's going to start to, or it can potentially lead to other things like depression, like difficulties with memory that we may not be able to kind of get back. So let's pay attention now while we have the opportunity. And kind of going along with the inconsistent sleep schedule is napping. So I am a big proponent of napping. I love a good nap. But what I realized is I was taking my nap for too long. So some of the advice, particularly for adults, is that for a quick nap, it should be 10 to 20 minutes. If you do anything 30 minutes or longer, you're starting to get into a different sleep cycle. And so inevitably, when you wake up, you are going to be more tired because you haven't completed the full sleep cycle and you've interrupted that sleep. So you'll feel more exhaustion. I remember just taking naps for 30 minutes, an hour, and never being able to regain that energy. But those shorter periods of time can help for just a quick boost. But if you needed a longer nap, it's recommended that you do 90 minutes to 120. So 10 to 20, 90 to 120. I know that is a huge difference, but our sleep cycles and making sure we're able to complete them make a big difference in sleep restoration. So while naps are amazing, let's pay attention, especially as we get older, to what our body needs to really help us get that energy if that's what we need for that day. And then, of course, screen time. We're on screens all the time. And I don't know about you, but I do find it hard sometimes to put my phone down. And it's not even like I'm talking to anyone or do it. It's almost like the need to just look at it because I think that we are so kind of programmed and focused just to scroll, to have something, to be looking at something, to constantly be multitasking. I say multitasking that way because I know I'm not good at it. I may be doing a few things, but I'm not really doing it efficiently. And so screens do keep our brains active. It keeps our brains moving. It helps to stimulate our thoughts. It helps us to laugh. It can be relaxing, but it's also keeping our brains active. So if we're talking about sleeping, not being on screens is going to be important. especially something that's going to be stimulating. If you're looking at social media, if you're reading a text, if you're reading an email, that is not going to help with stress, particularly if we're reading work emails after hours. And have you ever had that email that came up and it just instantly created anxiety, or that person emailed you and you were like, oh my gosh, what do they have to say? I know I've had that experience before. So one of the things I've had to start doing is just not look at the email and stop anticipating what could happen. Because what I find is the things that I am thinking about when I wake up in the middle of the night at 1 or 2 a.m., I can't fix or change or adjust. It is what it is. Doesn't mean that I can't come up with a better plan, but I also realize that when our sleeps, when we are tired, when we're not thinking clearly, our thoughts can tend to be a little bit more irrational. So I'm worried and I'm stressed about things that may not necessarily be an issue, or things that I can address or think through when I've had enough sleep. So not having sleep and coming up with a plan is not really going to be effective, because again, what's happening is our amygdala is in overdrive. And if our prefrontal cortex, our decision making, is not working the way it needs to, then how effective is the planning going to be anyway? So sleep is essential and it's important. We need it so that we can make better decisions, so that we can better emotionally regulate, and so that we can be more functional and do the things that we want to do in life. So my suggestions for that are a few things. Decrease your screen time, especially at least 30 minutes before bed. You're going to look at the screen, play a game that's relaxing. Try to put on your blue light screen, but the more you can put your phone down, your tablet down, the computer down, even the TV off, the better you'll be able to relax. And then try to get on a consistent schedule. When can you go to sleep? And how can you start to get your body in that process to remind yourself that it's time to go to sleep? Sometimes we need reminders to wind down. And then when we're napping, try to reduce it to 10 to 20 minutes or 90 to 120. And then stress and bed. What are the bedtime routines, the things that create relaxation for you? And how can you remove anything stressful from your bedroom? Your bedroom should be about peace, relaxation, whether that's smells, whether that's quiet, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whatever that is. But that should not be associated with stress or with work or with anything that's straining, because then that can tend to create an association that impacts how well you're able to fall asleep and, most importantly, stay asleep. And then caffeine. Let's try to shoot for no later than 2 o'clock, because in that 3 o'clock hour, again, 25% of the caffeine is still in our system. So then that also makes it hard to fall asleep. This is not perfection. This is about making small changes that are going to really help your overall health, hopefully help reduce instances of anxiety and depression and memory loss. So let's make small changes that will be big to help our mental health, to help our functioning, and to help us do all the things that we want to do and that we're meant to do in this world. This has been Wednesday Wellness with Dr. Gaynor Speaks. Thank you so much for joining. You can follow me on at Dr. Gaynor Speaks on Facebook and also on Instagram. I have my first book out. It's called Nina's Smile, and it is on Amazon, and it's also on all other formats where you buy your books. If you have any questions, comments, anything you would like us to talk about in the future, feel free to send us a DM, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.